Okay. All right. So today we're going to do some preserving. So let me just ask, have you guys done any kind of preserving before?
I have.
Just
Yes.
Cummings.
Okay. So what kind? Have you done something similar to this? Or like put stuff into a hot bottle or?
A bit of everything, sort of preserving olives. I've just recently done some eggs. So my friend had duck eggs, so they're in the fridge at the moment. And just beans and like just vinegar and hot water and salt and maybe a bit of sugar.
Okay.
So it's be interesting to
It'd
see
be similar to this
what
then.
what's best goes with what, because I haven't done a whole lot of it, but I like flying without. So.
Yeah. Okay. And how did you preserve the eggs? Like, did you boil them and put them in vinegar?
Yeah, hard boiled them, but
Oh,
not too
yeah.
hard. Peeled them and then did a brine. I think was pretty much half water, vinegar, salt. I chucked a bit of soy sauce in.
Yeah, for flavor.
Often I look at a few recipes and sort of just mix it up a bit.
Can I tell you, this is totally off this, but there's another way that you can preserve eggs where you don't have to cook them. And this is a very old preserving method. It came out of like the World Wars when there's no refrigeration, but they need to be able to keep eggs. And I don't know if you guys have gardens. If you ever use calcium, I don't know what you call it here, calcium slate, like lime solution.
Right.
You ever put lime in your garden? Calcium lime. I think that might be what you call it. Lime. Well, you don't use a garden grade, but you use a like kitchen grade, and you can make up a solution of lime and water and put your fresh, clean eggs. They have to be clean. Don't clean them off with anything because they have to have the bloom on the outside of the egg. So when the chicken lays the egg, it has a protective coat called a bloom. And if you clean that off, this won't work. And if they're pooey, it won't work. So it has to be clean eggs, like clean out of the nest eggs. You can put them into a container with a good fitting lid, pour that solution on top, cap it, and they will stay good for up to 18 months. Fresh eggs.
Wow.
Yeah. So maybe I'll bring them next time maybe, and we can just have a little look. It actually might be a good idea to go with the next one, which is going to be where the little flyers made, but it's going to be trying to stretch your meat. And so if anybody can get cheap eggs, or if you have your own chickens, and sometimes you get a glut of them, it's certainly not right now, but in the spring or something, then that tends to be what I will do. And I'm still eating them from the 9th month of last year.
Wow.
In that solution.
And do they get cooked in that solution?
No, they just
come out raw,
fresh
eggs.
So when you take them out, you can crack them. I even tried because I thought, I'll just see if they actually work as like whipped, whipping the whites and putting them into a cake.
Yeah.
And the whites will they will. You can dry them, you can scramble them, you can do anything you want with them. It's amazing. So, it's a very good way to do it. Anyway, I'll make a note to myself to do that next time and bring that and show you, because it's a very good way to keep eggs.
And unrefrigerated.
And that's the thing is what we might talk about in a minute, but I'll just a good segue now is that the reason for this kind of preserving and the solution for the eggs is that you don't have to put them in the fridge. So these are all shelf stable. Same with those eggs. They don't have to go into your fridge because the space is so limited, truly. And you always run the risk if you ordered in bulk, whether it's meat or produce or whatever, and you stick it in your freezer or your fridge, you always run that risk that you may lose it at some point, because the electricity could go out, whatever. It's not shelf stable, so there's always a risk. So this kind of gets around that. And if you ferment, so if you do fermentation, like you want to make sauerkraut and kimchi and all kinds of those kinds of things, they've got to go in your fridge and they start to take up space. So you need to then think of a strategy to get other things out of your fridge and to have them shelf stable. So what we're going to do today is the type of bottling it is. It's actually bottling and not canning. And I'm not being nitpicky here, but just so that people can understand the difference, is that when we do something like this, the stuff inside the jar must be acidic, okay? If you wanted to preserve something like chicken soup. You could not do it in this process. Okay? And I'll tell you the process that you would need to do that in a second, just so we don't confuse them. But what we're going to do today will all be in acid. So things that are acidic are like apple cider vinegar, or any kind of vinegar for that matter, lemon, salt, citric acid, and sugar. So, and then some things are just naturally acidic, right? So like tomatoes are pretty acidic. So when you're bottling, it needs to be a fruit that's naturally acidic, or you need to add some kind of acid to it to make sure the pH is low enough, like it's acidic enough to be able to be shelf stable. Okay? And that's because we're not pasteurizing these things. Like we're not sterilizing, rather. We're not sterilizing them. So if you buy a tin of, say, chickpeas at the grocery store, that has gone through a canning process, not a bottling process. So the chickpeas and the water and the salt, chickpeas and water, there's usually no salt, has to go through a pressure and a heat process. So what they do is they have special machines that they put those containers in, which applies both pressure and heat at the same time. And it sterilizes the inside of the jars. So that's a different process. So there's no meat or dairy involved in what we're going to do. So if you want to do that, that's a whole other process. And it's easy enough to learn, but I would learn it after you learn this, because it is kind of the next level up. Because you're taking a much greater risk if you don't do it properly, because the meat is definitely going to go off. The dairy is definitely going to go off. And it will be, you run the risk of having botulism, basically, of the botulism bacteria growing inside those containers, and it doesn't have a scent. So you won't go, oh, that's off. Like you'll smell it, it will have no smell whatsoever, but you will still get sick. So, so that's a whole separate process. So what we're going to do today, I'll just reiterate, just requires some kind of acidic environment. So either the produce itself needs to be acidic, or you need to add something that's going to make it more acidic. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So the two things we're going to do today, one is going to be a recipe out of here. I quite like this, and I would, if you're interested, I think I found this for a couple $, same as this one at the op shop. But getting something like this is probably pretty good. And you can easily find it. So we're gonna do zucchini and onion pickle. So that'll be, when someone says pickle, it just means it's in vinegar. Yep. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to prep that. It's going to then need to sit for a little while. And while that sits, then I'm going to show you how to preserve tomatoes. So the tomatoes we're going to do in a water bath. So have you done that kind of?
I haven't done a lot of tomatoes, no.
Or done a water
Done
bath?
sauce or relish, but not just straight up.
Yeah. So not in a water, like you put them in a jar in water and then put the
I've seen it done, but I haven't done it myself.
So that's how we're gonna do the tomatoes. It'll be different. So with the zucchini, we're gonna put them in a solution of vinegar that's hot. We're gonna have hot jars because I'm gonna pop them in the oven. We're going to put the hot solution with the pickles into the hot jars and cap them off. And the top will suction down and then they're set, right? Because they're acidic and they were hot, they can sit on your shelf for about a year. Most people have them for a couple of years. And because it is in vinegar, it will be more than enough acid for it to last a year or so. So then we'll do this, which will be putting the tomatoes. It'll come out looking much like that. So we'll cook up the tomatoes very quickly, put them in jars, fill this with hot water, put the lid on, and then cook them, okay, in the jars. So then that brings everything up to temperature. and then that will preserve that.
So is that essentially like buying a can of tinned fresh tomatoes at the supermarket?
Yeah, it is.
Cool.
If you're worried, so commercially grown tomatoes, they say they grow them to be sweeter these days. So if you're concerned about that, what you would want to do, if you think, oh, they do taste a bit sweet, you can add salt, you can add lemon juice, or you can add that citric acid to make them a little bit more acidic to ensure there's enough acid to preserve them. Now I'm going to use this little machine, and I'll have to say that the most dangerous thing that I own. So I warn you about it if you have one or you plan on using one that I have cut myself on, and I do find them pretty terrible, but they're also very functional. And I'll do thin slice. After I cut myself, I think it took me another year to try it again.
Yeah, they're scary.
They're scary. I can tell you all kinds of horror stories about them.
Can we not have any today?
No. I'm much more cautious now. I know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to use this as my compost. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody wants to stand up so you can see what's going on, feel
So
free.
what I'll do is I'll move this over to see better then. Actually, does anyone use one of these? I'll just show you and I'll move it back down. But if anyone, I find that they make life a lot faster. So they're great. And they're also even, so they cook evenly. I like that.
Yeah. I'm the world's slowest cutter up.
Yeah. And very helpful. But what I would say is leave the tops on and be very conservative. You can always go in your compost. Animals can eat it. You don't have to sacrifice your fingers. They do come with this little thing that goes on the top. I find that it didn't work. You know, you're supposed to stick this in here, but it never worked.
Yeah.
It's the shield, doesn't it? Anyway. So, what we're going to do is, I'm somewhat guesstimating here, I have to be honest, with weights and things. But it will be okay.
I weighed the three when I ordered.
Oh, how much was it?
Kilo each. So you got 3 kilos of tomatoes there.
This is 1 kilo?
And that's 1 kilo.
Okay. I do take the bottoms off these. I suspect you probably could use them. You can do the same exact method with cucumbers. It will work just the same. Same recipe and everything. You could change them out. And one thing about recipes, as long as you've got the acid right, the rest is really just a template. So don't feel like you can't adjust them. If you don't like onion, leave that. Substitute something else. If you like more onion, I like them actually quite oniony, and not everybody does. Then I would just put more onion in. But with recipes, I think you should just make them your own. You don't have to follow exactly what they say.
A lot of older recipes have sugar in them.
Yeah, always. As a rule of thumb, I would always cut at least half the sugar out of any recipe, and then keep going from there. I find anyway.
Would someone need sugar to make the preserving process?
You will.
So would you add more? How do you?
If you're going to do something like, well, look, let me back up. I'm trying to think of a politically correct way to say this, because the whole world follows the United States FDA's guidelines on preserving food. And they're extremely conservative. If you accept some places in Europe, all right, so if you go to Europe, you will actually find that people will not add sugar at all to their fruits before they bottle them. But because places like America there's a litigation issue, people want to sue other people for anything. It makes people tend to be much more conservative about what they do. And so they will want the pH to be acidic enough that they can cover their asses. That's the reality of it. But if you were to go to France, it wouldn't be like that at all. And they do a lot of preserving without, I should have brought that book. I'll bring it next time. They do a lot of preserving without canning or freezing. So they just sit in bottles or in crocks or in jars, just around the house, under the house. And they don't really have a problem with people dying. So if you want to be conservative, you need to follow the US FDA guidelines on preserving. But you can find that other people around the world don't follow that. And the Japanese, they wouldn't follow those either. But they use a lot of salt. So they would be preserving, think about miso and all of they're preserving in salt. Yeah. You can leave sugar out. Over the years, I have decreased my sugar content in all of my fruits. And I still have success. They still come out fine. They still last a year. So.
It's more for the flavour, balancing the flavour a bit, I guess, with the sugar, or
it could, if you like that. Like, and if you think that I do them all different ways. So one batch might have vanilla in it. The next batch might have some brown sugar and cinnamon. The next batch might have a bit of honey and rhubarb in it. Just so they're not all the same, and so I don't get so bored because I literally have hundreds of those in my house. Yeah. And we are going to live on until we get some more next year. So there'll be no apples. I won't purchase apples or tomatoes or any of those kinds of things. Like, I grow my food, it's there. That's what we're going to live on. And I guess I don't want to get bored of it. So I don't want my kids to get bored of it. So I just change it up. Yeah. Just do it differently. And different spices. You can add different spices to it. And, historically, spices were used as preservatives.
So I love the Asian pickling stuff and ferment my kimchi and but with the Asian pickling, it's always sugar. And this is the only time, and just the few things that I've done.
Yeah.
I don't even I have some raw sugar in my house just for that.
Yeah.
But it's the only time ever I actually eat sugar. Is there a substitute or?
Well, so you're pickling. So there's probably slight differences in the language here. So when you're saying pickling, tell me what you mean.
I'm cooking it on the stove with the sugar and the vinegar, and then putting it in a jar.
And eating it. So it's like, say it's ginger. Maybe we're going to pickle ginger. It always has sugar in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or radish or daikon or even jalapenos.
Yeah. My way around that would be to start to ferment things instead.
Okay.
To use a salt brine instead of a sugar.
Yeah.
Sugar salt mixture. That would be the way I would get around that. So let's say it was turnips or what did you just say? Radishes, things like that. You can also ferment your radishes.
Yeah.
Instead.
Yeah.
So basically, you put them in a salt brine.
Yeah.
And allow them to ferment that way. Generally, about 5 to 10 days, depending on the time of year. With a lid on top of them, or just on your bench.
Yep.
Just like you would maybe make sauerkraut.
Yep.
Kimchi. Same principle.
Okay.
And try to see if you prefer it in that way.
Okay.
And you'll have no sugar.
Yeah.
You will have salt, but no sugar. And if you use a high quality salt, something like that, or the gray salt, then you'll be adding extra minerals. So the reason I like this one is because it's extra iron and other minerals that make it pink.
Yep.
And then the grey salt just has different, it's magnesium and some other ones. And so if you just keep those around the house, there's no problem with using extra salt. It will just add extra minerals to your diet.
Okay.
Yeah, so see how that goes. You can do it with turnip. You can do it with rutabaga. What do you call that here? Sweet. Sweet?
The red stamped thing.
I think it is sweet. Is it not sweet here?
Rhubarb.
Rhubarb. Is it rhubarb?
No, like a rutabaga is a sweet.
Oh.
It's like a round, radishy type root. It's like a turnip.
Yes.
So you can have turnips.
Oh.
And you can pickle them, and they all come out nice.
I've seen those, but I didn't know what they were for because I didn't recognize them.
I've experimented with all of them, and like it's you buy just one, or someone will be making them, or growing them, and they want to get rid of them. Just give one a go. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, so what? I mean, it's just like chickens. They eat anything, don't they?
Do you know how you just put your onion skin in the compost?
Yes.
I saw a reel and they dehydrated the onion skin and then they broke it up and they put it in like a spice jar. And that's how they use their onion dried spice.
Nice.
Onion skin. Isn't that so clever?
My daughter keeps them and she uses them. Just gonna look for something. She uses them to dye with.
Oh.
They make a very pretty kind of
brown.
Kind of that kind of color. Like
right.
An apricot color. Dye.
I don't think this would have flavor punch.
Like that's onion.
I don't know.
It's a bit funny texture. Onion skin.
Well, it's dried, so then it's smashes, and it's just like the shakeable stuff, but maybe it doesn't have the spice.
Because I always peel it off an extra too, so it gets that extra under the skin.
Right.
Happy to guesstimate that's sugar. I mean salt, sorry. 1/4 cup of salt on there. So that's 1 kilo of zucchini. I only used 1 onion because it was quite large. And it calls for 1/4 cup of salt on top. Just making my eyes water, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And so that needs to be left for now, ideally for an hour. Okay? So I'm just going to pop it here out of the way and allow that to sit. And basically all the liquid will be coming out.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. I would do a cucumber chili. That's an easy thing. You give me the pass, right? Chinese for that
without yeah. That's more about flavor when you're pickling and fermenting. Like if you're doing those slow pickles that you put in the fridge, it's more about flavor.
Yeah.
But if you're happy without sugar, all of those you can do without sugar. It's cheap too, right?
Yeah. I want to create, the yellow daikons that you buy in the plastic bag. I want to make those, but they're sweet, and so I haven't googled the recipe yet. But it's a daikon radish, and I love them. And I want to do a white pickle and a yellow pickle.
There's a gentleman who lives out at Burgett that grows quite successfully lots of daikon.
Oh.
I think it's his name. Tancred. Tancred is a German man. Do you know him? He sells at the market. Yeah.
I've never seen him at the market.
He used to do Eden Market. He doesn't anymore.
No, he does Pendula. I mean, he does Candela still. He does the Friday markets in Eager, the Scalper Market. But he tends to have daikon.
Okay.
At a decent price.
I'm gonna make it there. Is everything there homegrown?
He will tell you they are.
Yeah.
Like sweet potato do not grow in the middle of winter.
Right.
So I would just ask.
Yeah.
Daikon, very easy to grow.
Very easy.
I like
Radish
Like
are
a
easy to grow.
Oh
Yeah.
my
Just-
God.
Just as long as you've got some loose soil under there.
Yeah.
I couldn't find them anywhere when I moved here, and I put it on Facebook. I put it on my Eden page.
Oh.
Does anybody have any? Do they sell any?
Yes.
Or can I buy the
So
seeds?
You can get the seeds from the seed collection.
Okay.
From the seed collection, probably from Diggers.
Okay.
Diggers Club, I think it's called. I'm sure the seed collection has them.
They're online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of who else. I haven't seen them from, those ones that sit and at the grocery stores and Motor 10 and stuff. The
Oh, yeah.
doctor someone says something.
It's a brown.
Yeah, that's it. I've never seen daikon with them.
Yeah.
But I have purchased daikon seeds because I grow them and
Yeah.
they are easy to grow like any radish.
Rad. I'm having a veggie garden done right now. My neighbor's helping me build the raised garden beds.
Right.
So this class is perfect timing.
So all I'm doing, this is roughly chopping this. I'm going to just put a little extra salt. Or I could put lemon juice. Maybe have a lemon here. If I can find a juicer, I might just put that in just cause. But there's nothing special happening here. I'm not going to add any water or anything. I'm not de-seeding them and I'm not taking the skins off, although you could if you wanted to. I just go for that. I find that that's laborious. But if you want to do it, you can make an X at the bottom. Okay. On all of them, get a very big like Pyrex dish or something bowl. Put them in it. Pour your hot water on it, like boiling water, just boiled water, and let them sit for a couple of minutes. Then you'll see that these will start to curl up. Then you can grab them and pull the skins right off. You can then open them up and de-seed them if you want. But I just find that is very hard.
Is there nutrition in the skin?
Yeah. People would take the seed out or the skin out because they don't like the mouthfeel. Because you can see in this one, obviously it has seeds. And you can also see that it has skins.
Yep.
And I think it's just it's kind of an aesthetic thing. The only time, people might want to take these out is if you had something like diverticulitis, diverticulosis. You've got those pockets in your bowel, something can get stuck in there. That's why they tell you not to eat sesame seeds and lots of seedy things because it can get stuck in those little loose bits of the bowel and then get infected. So that might be the only time I could see that you might want to remove them. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother. But it's probably just an aesthetic thing.
And sorry, another question.
Yeah.
I save all my like pastas jars and stuff. Can we use those? Because the lids do suck down.
Yep.
Can we use those instead of these jars?
Yes. So these ones are just for me to show you. I'm not going to use these jars today. It was just that's all I had at home. So I wanted to kind of bring you some examples, but I didn't really have any other examples. So to answer your question, when we do the method where we're going to put them in with the tomatoes, or we're going to put it in here, the jars all need to be the same height. Okay? So I've got all my jars are the same height. So the two things you'll need is jars of the same height and non-damaged lids. So if you had to whack that lid and it's now buckled, don't try that.
Okay.
It's not going to work. But the seal will not be tight enough. So as long as it's in good nick, great, use it. This other one that we're going to do with the zucchini pickle, they can be any size. Doesn't matter because they're not getting processed together. They're just getting poured into the jar and it's just going to sit there with the lid on tight. So it doesn't matter. You can use any size. Doesn't have to be uniform in any way. But this process does. Okay. And you'll see the reason you have to have the same size lid, jars, is because the water needs to come up 2/3 of the way. 3/4 of the way, somewhere around there. So that if they're all different sizes, you can't do that. Yeah. And that's the only reason. But they're easy to come by. So if you have something that you use quite often, keep them so that you have a good amount of them. And if you do have like a Vacola bottling system or a Ball mason jar bottling system or whatever, you'll have to use the same size jars. So when I process, doesn't matter what's in them. For the most part, I would need everything this size or everything this size or everything this size. Yeah. And those bottling systems, if you do ask around, like if it's something that interests you, you can start asking around and putting out messages, and people will get rid of theirs. Or someone's grandmother passes away and they don't know what to do with it. They want to give it away. With home. That's how I got mine. Just start asking around. People also know that they are worth a lot and that people want them. So sometimes the price is outrageous.
Yeah.
So just be careful of that also. But I just got given one for free.
Yeah.
Absolute free. I gave them a couple of pumpkins in exchange for it. That was all I had to do, which I was very excited. I didn't keep it. I gave it to a friend who is interested in starting bottling. But if you start to put your feelers out there, people will respond. Or the op shops.
Yeah.
Which is where I got my original one about 16 years ago. Just said, oh, I'm looking for that. And they eventually called me about a month later and said, oh yeah, $20, you can have the whole thing. Everything, nice. Jars, lids, rubber bands, everything. The whole, we'll call it like the bottling system itself from the 1960s or something. It's fabulous. You can also use mason jars. So as Americans, like those 2-piece lids, you can use those as well. I find that they are outrageously expensive at the moment, where they used to be very cheap to get a hold of. Yeah. They're not anymore. We've even tried to order them in bulk through a whole community and then split them up, order 300 at a time, and then split them up in still the price. Again, it used to be very economical to do that. Yeah. But in the past 3 years, the price is just pretty outrageous. Yeah, everything's outrageous. Little versus one. Burn. And I'm going to try to get it to go down yet. Yeah. Just going to try to get it to go down a bit so I can put the rest in. Did you have any other questions about bottling? I'm just going to cut these up and I'm going to watch someone.
Shannon has lots of Japanesey pickling, fermented eggs and stuff. Whenever I need inspiration, I call her and say, give me an idea.
That's a good one. There is a little booklet somewhere that has a few recipes in it. So there's a beetroot recipe. I think there's this recipe. Yes, that's it. There should be enough for everyone. If not, I can email.
That's what I want my pantry to look like. Pantry goes. Is this your pantry?
It is not my pantry.
So with the tomatoes you're doing now, obviously, you're saying it's enough acidity. You literally don't need to add sugar or salt or
a little salt to it.
A little bit of salt. Yeah. More for flavour, sort of, or and preserve.
Because these are store-bought. These are not, I did not grow these. Yeah. She's purchased them. And like I said earlier, that much like carrots, carrots and tomatoes and lots of vegetables are now grown for their sweetness as opposed to how they originally tasted. Like carrots were not orange and they weren't sweet, but they've been engineered that way. And so now, I guess, to be on this, to err on the side of caution, I would probably put a bit of salt.
Yeah.
I could put the lemon in, like I said, if I can find a juicer, I will put the lemon in. And then a good thing to do is sometimes you can find these dissolvable stickers that you can write on the outside. You put them on the outside of your jars and you can write on them. And you could write tomato with salt. Yeah. So you do know that it's it has salt in it, so that when you go to make whatever recipe you're going to make, you're more conservative with your salt because it's already a bit salted. You can also just write on them with a marker, a texter, like a permanent marker of some kind, a Sharpie. And then just use Method to take it off. I'm not, as you can see, not very good at it. But I think it's because I have.
Yeah.
I just get over it and I don't really want to. Yeah. I just feel a bit overwhelmed and I have to move on to another batch of preserving and forget to label them.
Yeah.
I'm just going to leave those there. That's just on. Just going to find a big spoon and pan.
Just that one tomato's good. I do like the idea of just plain old tomatoes.
Yeah.
Cool.
Those pans made in the pantry.
Oh, yeah, I love gotta have whole veal.
What's going on? It's getting late.
Oh, I know. We've been watching it.
What's that?
Mr. Chef.
Oh, I have been watching.
Does it inspire you?
I need to take on do what I do. Yeah.
Never do that.
They're so dedicated to what they're doing. It's amazing.
Talking about Master Chef.
Oh, yes.
It inspires me, makes me want to learn and do, like, get out of my boring box and do more things.
Now, I'm just, as I'm waiting, I'm hoping that flame keeps going. I'm just going to make up the pickling liquid. So I'm going to jump around back and forth, sorry. But this is just for the pickles. So it's 2.5 cups. It calls for white vinegar, but I don't particularly like white vinegar. You could use whatever. What wine vinegar is actually really?
But malt vinegar, but is it,
It's not gluten free. Can I just tell you that
Right.
in case people come over and say, "Is this gluten free?" Malt vinegar is not, because
Right.
malt is made out of barley, which has gluten in it. Just so that, just a side note.
Yeah, no, interesting. And the other day I because I had the two in the cupboard, I actually mixed it, a bit of white and a bit of malt. So
You can get a different flavour.
yeah, it's just something different. But
Yeah. I like white wine vinegar.
Yeah.
I just think it's more mellow than just straight up white vinegar. I make apple cider vinegar, but they will tell you that is not something you should use.
right.
Homemade apple cider vinegar. And the reason is, sorry, I'm just short, so I won't open the other bottle. The reason is because you can't be sure that your homemade apple cider vinegar has the right pH. So you might not want to use that. But that could be that's another option if you were going to use it very quickly. Yeah. If you want to make pickles and you're going to use them quite quickly, you could use your homemade apple cider vinegar, but you wouldn't want them to hang around long. Unless you maybe tested the pH of your homemade vinegar. Does anyone make vinegar?
No.
It's quite so what I'm putting there is in that you can use your apple scraps to make vinegar. So you would get a bucket of some kind, or you could use a jar. And when you're like cutting up your apples and you've got those apple cores left, or if you're peeling apples, you've got the skin left, you just pop that in your bucket, and then you cover however much you have with an additional quarter of water. So let's say I had a container of apple scraps. You would add up to that here of water, a little bit of sugar to get it started, put a cheesecloth over the top, because what you want is you want an aerobic environment where the oxygen is getting in, okay? But you don't want bugs in there, so you want to cover it with a cheesecloth. And you can kind of stir it every day. And after a couple of weeks, you can take out the bits that are there, cover it again, and you will eventually, after about 8 weeks, get vinegar. But it has to be in an aerobic environment, because if you cover it up, you get alcohol. So if you take apples or any kind of fruit and then you put it in an anaerobic environment, that's when you get hard apple cider. Right, so so if there's oxygen, you'll get vinegar. If there's no oxygen, you will get alcohol. So that's why apples were such a important thing on homesteads, particularly in the States, because not only did you get to eat them and you can preserve them and you can use them in many different ways and feed them to animals, but you can make alcohol out of them and you can make vinegar out of them, and it's just the scraps. So they're pretty versatile, and you can see why people had lots of apple trees. And now I'm very appreciative that I have lots of apple trees. Because now I see the use for it.
So is there any difference in the nutrition from the ones that you buy at the grocery store that are organic with the mother in them?
No, and no. It's just you guarantee the pH is correct in them.
Okay.
Because they can't sell them unless they have a set pH. They have to have, in order to call it vinegar, it's got to have a certain pH, and so you guarantee that.
Yeah.
That should be really nice quality. If you found the mother, which I'm not seeing a mother in there, you can take that mother out and put it into that apple scraps, and it would
regenerate.
We would keep going, and then you could use that as a SCOBY, right? Just like if you had kombucha.
Yeah.
And then you can keep using that, and it will help to make that vinegar faster. Yeah. So you can keep using that, and you could even juice apples, put that mother in the apple juice, and you'll get vinegar. As long as it's under aerobic condition.
I missed what the mother was, because I saw it on the video and I bought it.
A mother is a SCOBY, which is a symbiotic. Hold on, I gotta think about it. Community of bacteria and yeast.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what it is. And so basically, when you're gonna make kombucha or kefir milk or kefir water, there's a mother, which is like the thing that inoculates it to start it going. So if you wanted to make kombucha, does everybody know what kombucha is? It's a drink, it's quite popular at the moment. The way that you do that is it has a mother, which is this flat
alien.
Yeah, it's the same placental thing. It looks kind of like a placenta in a way. And it will make more of itself. It like makes babies. And you'll get these layers of it, which you can take them apart and give them away, and people can start their own kombuchas, right? But it's the thing that you need in order to inoculate that tea, that sweet tea, to become kombucha. And similar to this, it will start a mother. Again, I'm not seeing it, otherwise I'd take it out and show you. Which is kind of a transparent, fluffy looking thing.
Right.
And then you could put that in your next batch of apples.
So when you do your apples and you've done them from scratch and stuff, you will get this.
You will get it. You
Thing.
will. Yes. Yeah. So then you can just keep using that, or again, you can give it away and other people can have it. And I think it's bad you can sell it.
Similar to yes. Is it similar to the plant that you make or that you grow when you make ginger beer?
Yes, that's all. They're all
the
different
same.
mothers.
Yeah.
Sometimes they go by different names, because if you have kefir, it's usually called crystals or grains, because they are more grain-like and it folds up together as opposed to being flat.
Okay.
But it's the same
sort of
same principle in that it's different varieties of bacteria and different yeasts that have colonized together to create this colony, which gives those beneficial or good bacteria into the thing that you were inoculating. Yeah.
See, old me would have gone, oh, gross, and thrown it out.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Oh, what's that doing in there? I think a lot of us would have.
Oh, that's disgusting.
Now we know that it's really pretty fascinating, actually. So in here, there's pickling liquid. I'm just going to keep an eye on that. All I've got so far is the vinegar. Now I'm going to add a teaspoon each of peppercorns. I had fennel. I didn't have it called for celery seeds, which I didn't have and I never have, so I just substitute something else. And then some turmeric. I'm not going to add salt because earlier I added a quarter cup of salt. So I don't need to add any more salt to it. I just want to add flavor to it. And that is all it is. So I'll just recap. It's just a kilo of sliced zucchini and onion. I only used the one. A quarter cup of salt. That's 2.5 cups almost of vinegar. And then your seasoning. And I just do whatever you like, really. The turmeric gives it a pretty color. Leave it out if it gives you a tummy ache. It does some people. Put whatever you like in it. You know, whatever you've got around. Again, this is where I think that they're kind of fluid. They're just templates. As long as you've got that acid right, it doesn't matter what seasoning you put in there.
So they say with turmeric to always pair it with black pepper.
Yes. So that's why I'm going to add peppercorn.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you would recommend that as well?
Well, I would.
For anti-inflammatory.
But the other key to that is that it really needs fat as its delivery system, and there's no fat in here.
Okay.
So that's why those what are they called? Like at the chai, golden chai latte kind of things.
Yeah.
Are probably a really good way of doing it because they do have fat. So whatever milk you're making it in, or if you add coconut oil or MCT oil, which a lot of recipes have, added to it, then you've got your fat as your delivery system. And by that I mean, like, if you think about vitamins, you've got fat-soluble vitamins and you have water-soluble vitamins, right? And the water-soluble ones are the ones like your B vitamins that you eat every day but you urinate out because they're in your water and they just go out with your water. Your body holds on to some of them and you have a store of them, but what you don't need, you just get rid of. But fat-soluble vitamins are different. And so that's like A, D, E, and K. And those 4, if you say eat a vegetable, and let's say, I don't know, Swiss chard, silver beet, which has those vitamins in it, okay? And you just eat it on it's just been boiled, I don't know, something sauteed in water. There's no fat there. So you actually might absorb the B vitamins, but you're not actually going to absorb the fat-soluble vitamins, the A, E, D, and K. So you kind of have lost them, which is why you really need to have butter or coconut oil or olive oil or some kind of fat as the vehicle that the fat-soluble vitamins kind of jump in the vehicle, if you will, and then the fat drives it into the cells. Otherwise, it gets urinated out. It's the same with turmeric. Turmeric does need pepperine, which is in the pepper, but it needs the fat delivery system. It needs that vehicle. It's got to jump in the back of it, if you will, and get driven into the cells with that. It's kind of like if you think about insulin, right? So people whose cells become insulin resistant, it can't get in. It's the same thing. So you have to have things, in some cases, that are like a delivery system. They're like a delivery driver, and you got to kind of get in in the vehicle and be driven into the cells. And that's one. So
I had no idea.
You're going to absorb some of this, but this would not be. I wouldn't be using it as an anti-inflammatory in and of itself. I'd be drinking some, or I'd be eating it with the fat. I'd put it on top of my eggs for breakfast, right? That the eggs had the fat, and I cooked it in some kind of fat, and then I would absorb it better.
I wonder. I'd take a supplement. I wonder if it
of turmeric.
Yeah, with black pepper. I wonder if it's bioavailable because of the fat thing.
Well, so it depends. So if you're taking it, on an empty stomach, no. But if you're taking it with a meal that has fat in it, yes, it'll be fine. So just take it with a meal.
Fine, no.
Things we learn. Go on, so the rest of the time I'll have some snack.
Shelf, isn't that taking I love cooking.
Instead.
And I might see that quite a little pot. So I was in the cover that says
One would hope.
So what I'm going to do is this little mixture, and the pan was going to be available soon. It's not. So I'm going to warm it up in here. The other thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn these ovens down. Just to one. So, keep on warm. For the jars in here to warm up. So my jars are going to be hot. My solution is going to be hot. And first of all, this won't crack when I do that. I will also put it on a cutting board because a surface like this is cold. So if I have a hot jar with hot stuff on a cold surface, you run the risk of it cracking. So this is where you need something that's a warmer surface. Depends on what your kitchen is made of. Probably not like this, because this is a commercial kitchen. But nonetheless, just be conscious that it needs to go on something that's warmer as opposed to something like that. So you don't run the risk of it cracking.
What temperature is the oven?
I'll just put it on keep warm, which is 100. I am going to put gloves on to take them out. So I find these are actually thick enough to do it, and I can still feel through them. I find that's kind of a problem. They need to be thick enough to protect you, but thin enough that you can feel what you're doing and you're not dropping things. And I like this kind of a Pyrex. As you can see that it's actually dyed yellow from doing this so much. I don't know if you can see that, but it has a yellow hue to it now because of having the turmeric in it in a hot solution so often. It's now a bit dyed yellow. So what I do is I will scoop this out once it's hot enough I'm going to put it all together and then pour this hot, because this can tolerate the heat, into those hot jars, wearing my gloves, just so I don't burn me. It seems to work pretty well. I'm sure there's other methods, and if you've got a better method, great. It's just the way my partner does it, and he usually does this I usually do that. He usually does this. So this is just the way he does it. I'm sure it can be improved on. So, I'm just going to rinse it in. There's a little bit of water down there. I'm going to get some of this off.
So long as it's just boiling water, it's like radishes.
Now, the 2.5 cups also never seems to be enough water. I always think to add more liquid, but it does always work. So I actually had 2.25 cups in here because I didn't want to open that second jar. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that it works, but I think it will, because part of the liquid, the heat will come out while I cook it, and so it will make a little bit more liquid. But I'll just show you now that it will look like this. It won't look like there's enough. So I'm holding it flat. You can see that it's just barely seems to have enough liquid, but it will work. I have made the mistake of adding more and then being left with a huge amount of pickling liquid, which I then just put in a jar and put in the fridge until the next time I wanted to pickle, which is an option. Like, you can do that, because again, it's fairly acidic and it's going to live in your fridge for a long time if you want it to. Now,
Everything was to sterilize it and I sure it was sterilized and it's about forming the air out. Is that right?
And not cooking the jars.
Yeah.
Is that
Right.
it doesn't happen?
But if you put in hot stuff in, you can seal to get it.
Okay, so just about not having the jar.
And sterile.
now, can I see one of those? Do you mind? And I'll just see if I say everything I want to say.
So I think I'll always use apple cider vinegar now, like for pickling, just rather than anything else.
I think it just depends on what you're doing and what the end result you want as your end result. Yeah. White wine vinegar is a little bit more expensive. You can buy them all in bulk, cheaper in Candula. At Big Foods.
Yeah.
They're not open all day. They have a period of time where you can go in and purchase from them. You just go into their little door and they're very nice. And you can say, I need bulk this. And it's much less expensive. So if you actually are going to bottle stuff, that is a very good way of buying bulk stuff for much less. So you can buy your apple cider vinegar, your white wine vinegar, your white vinegar, your malt vinegar. Pretty much they carry all of them.
Red wine vinegar.
Pretty sure they do. So any of those are okay.
Olive oil.
Yeah, they buy bulk. They sell bulk olive oil. They don't have a lot of organic products. I've noticed, but they do have some. The next alternative would be to order through like wholesale through Honest to Goodness. I don't know if anyone does that around here.
Karen used to.
Yeah, there was a group with Susie Alessandro. Don't know if you know her, but she had a group that was ordering out of Wyndham in this area. But what you can do is sign up, and you do have to buy $500 in order to get the wholesale price. I find that's not all that difficult when you have a group of people. So you will get, it will cost a fraction of the price. So whereas I think for maybe 20 something or $30 for 4 or 5 liters apple cider vinegar. Whereas you go to the shop and I don't know how much this was, but it would be nowhere near as you know. Doing it like this would be far more expensive. So if you're going to start to actually do it, you can pool together with other people and start ordering in bulk and sharing that out, and it will drop your price dramatically. So, and if you think you have 5 friends and everybody spend $100, you could get your $500 whole, and it'd be a wholesale price. So even if you Google them and you look at their prices, that's still not the wholesale price online. That's still the retail price. So you would deduct even from that, and you would be very surprised. So there are ways to do it and buy in bulk instead of doing it this way, because this just will cost you more. And then in the end, I think people give up trying to cook and grow their own stuff because it seems more expensive. Like my friend always says, like, you know, every apple will produce, you know, several dollars because you think you have to water it, you have to fertilize it, it's your labor to, you know, cover it from the birds and then to pick it and then to process it and then to put it in the bottles, and that's electricity or gas or whatever it is that you're going to do. And in the end, you look at it and you go, my goodness, like that bottle of applesauce was so expensive. And I think people stop doing what they're doing because of that. So you've got to find ways to make it more economical for you. Does that make sense? Yeah. A lot of people just walk away. Like when I look out from Candula, I kind of sit at the very top of Candula. I can see in this direction an apple orchard that's just been walked away from. I can see in that direction, you know, an olive orchard that's just in, you know, just collecting flies. You know, like it's nothing happening because people have just gone, it's more expensive to do this kind of work. But I don't think it has to be that way. And I think also, if people pool together, let's turn this one off. If people pool together, they will find also that they could make it work as a group. All right. Some reason needs to keep turning off. That's why. Operator error. Sorry. So I think that if people do something as a group, one, it can keep you interested. Like you were saying, sometimes you need inspiration. But it can also it won't be as laborious Like if you try to do everything on your own, it's rather overwhelming. So if you can organize a day where you might do this together with other people, you can get much further. Just because many hands make light work. Yeah.
I have a friend that does it in the Blue Mountains, and so I was a member of that group.
Oh yeah.
And there were a ton of us that ordered from her.
Yeah.
And we'd get the deliveries on her porch, and she would tell us how much to put in her account, and then we'd just go and pick it up from the porch. And we're all foodies, and we care about where our food comes from. I'll look into about honest to goodness stuff, and
there's a lot of groups around.
yeah,
So when the term came recently to drop it all off at my place, we're the ones that distribute it out, and people come to pick it up. I said, "Oh, there's more in the back. Is that ours?" And he said, "Oh no, there's like 3 or 4 groups around here."
right.
So there are a lot of people ordering in that way.
Fantastic.
So you could even ask if there's already someone doing it. Because I do know that there is a person in Eden who has a goal, who has already set it up.
Okay.
So there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. People could just all jump on that and divvy it up. But also doing the work too. Like if you can either grow or find a farmer who's willing to sell to you their produce, because if you can buy from someone local, it's always better.
Yeah.
Just that money's or it stays in your community, it's always better, right? But just also the preserving and the bottling and the labor, and it's just easier when it's multiple people. Yeah. And even like in Cantaloupe, another thing that we do. So I'm just putting these down enough for me to bottle them and let that one boil. Another thing that we do is have a gardening group, which every other Thursday meets at someone else's house. You know, we just go and do big projects. So like the building of garden beds or pruning of fruit trees, or, you know, jobs that are just big. And when I walk out to my orchard, I think, that's okay, I'm going to try to walk back in because it just seems like too much. But if I've got 8 girlfriends there, it's amazing. We can get it all done in one day, and then I don't feel so overwhelmed. You know, that's another way of doing it. Is really just, if you want to grow the food or you want to process the food, not just the ordering and the buying of it, is to just do it as a group. You can just still be all the same group. Mine are actually all different. So the people who order the bulk food are different from the gardening group, or different from the like food share group, because not everybody's interested in the same thing, but they're all represented in Cantaloupe, so that you can be part of all of them if you want, which is really lovely. And I'm sure there's lots of food shares around, or food swaps sometimes they're called. I know that there's a lot in like Bega Way, Opera, Buckajoe, all of that area, but I imagine there would be some here too. And then you just come with what you produce, and other people come with what they produce, and you can all just share it out. And no money involved. Yeah. Okay. I think this is probably still quite hot, but I'm going to move it over here. And what I'm going to do is put these tomatoes into these other jars.
That's good to see.
Okay. So now I'm going to process them in here. And what I've got is just a tea towel in the bottom, just so that things, because this isn't made, this is just a regular pot from my kitchen. It's not made to do this kind of preserving in. So if you buy a preserving Lucola system, it's going to have this little piece of metal at the bottom that is like a step that keeps these from touching the bottom, so that they don't bounce around and crack. So that's really right on heat. So that's what this tea towel is going to do. It's going to basically just keep everything. I might actually put 2, one going in opposite directions. keep everything from bouncing around and banging and breaking. Okay? And what I'm also going to do, just before I start, I'm just going to see how many jars fits. I wasn't very good at planning this out, but it was purposeful because I want things to go wrong, and so that we can talk about how we solve those problems. Does that make sense? Yeah. Because I think that's probably the best way to learn. So I'm not actually going to get them all in there. Nearly. What I might do, I might open up that. I might swap tea towels because I think this one's bigger. Let me try again. No. If I add another one. No. Yeah, that will work. Here we go. So 2, 4, 6 will fit. Let's just say, what would I do? Would it be better that I left one out? Or is there some better option? Does anyone know?
Just use them up in the cooking.
That would that's right. So if I can't fill a jar, save them. But I actually need to have the 6 jars in here so that they don't bang around. So the best thing to do is, let's just say I've got 1 jar I can't fill. Don't fill it at all, except put it in as a blank, as a dummy to hold the place, and fill it with water. Doesn't have to have a lid or anything on it. Just fill it with water so it's stationary and it takes up that space. Because if you don't put it in, that's when they'll move around. So it's like a dud, I would call it a dud. And it would be the same for a Bacola bottling system. If you could only fill 8 of your 9 jars, that's fine. Just take your last jar and fill it with water, and you still use it. You need to have it as a placeholder. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna not burn my hands in doing this. So what you want to make sure when you fill your jars is that you leave a space. So this is the shoulder of the jar where it kind of comes out, and this is the neck of your jar. For that. And so I want to fill them to the shoulder. I want to leave space because when it's in there, it's processing, it's all going to kind of come up to the top, like against the lid, and then kind of fall back down. You need that space. Otherwise, again, they could explode or crack. And that's true for the Bacolas as well. And they will repeat that and repeat that and repeat that in every single recipe in there, that you must not fill them all the way to the top. And if you notice, those are not filled to the top. Hopefully they're filled to about the shoulder, what I just called the shoulder. So that would be correct. The other thing that I will do is to just clean off the food from around that top. Does that make sense? Just where the thread is, because I don't want it to stop the lid going on properly. No. Do you have any questions? Was that clear? Does that make sense? Yeah.
I just looked on Facebook Marketplace and there's no Bacola anything.
No.
It's up for hundreds of miles.
Yes. A friend of mine did find them in Canberra recently, and she felt it was worth going up there, visiting her family and getting them and bringing them home. Another friend of mine just found them in Wollongong just by chance, so you could keep looking. Does anyone want to give this a go instead of watching me do it? Anyone feel the need to? No. Such a There. Oh, I did it at salt. Did I? I did say I was going to add it. Now, just double check I have said everything. So these jars, like I said, they're obviously purchased because they're uniform, but you do not need to buy jars for this. The best place to go is to the op shop, and there will always be lots of jars there. Or get your friends to keep jars, or yeah.
I'm a stereo jar.
Yeah.
Too, but
I've ordered as well.
Yeah.
go through them.
So there you can find them. You do not have to purchase them. I have to purchase them if I'm going to sell things. So if I sell teas or remedies or whatever, you need to be in real, like in fresh jars, in non-previously used jars. So I happen to have a bunch of them in my shed, but you don't have to do that for this process. Like I said earlier, the only requirement will be that they're uniformly the same height. Okay, that's all that has to be the same. Now, what else is I've also noted in here that you can double, triple, quadruple, whatever you want to do based on how much produce you've got or are able to get a hold of or forage. There's lots of apple trees out there that I see on the sides of the roads that just the birds eat them. But whatever you can get a hold of, just increase the quantity of the recipe and just go from there. Just do as much as you possibly can. There are some recipes in that book which I would think wouldn't taste very good.
The ginger one looks really interesting.
There's also like banana. I don't know.
Oh.
I don't know that there's some foods in there that I would not. Oh, grapes. I don't think I would bother. There's some things you really probably need to take into consideration, like type of insurance, but also things like, is it necessary to try to bother that? Do you really need it all year long? I don't know. I would take those things. Some things you just don't need to do.
Yeah, because like tomatoes are really versatile. You can use them in so many. Whereas a jar of grapes, you sort of really wonder about what.
Yeah. Is it really worth the
effort,
the resources that go into it? Because that's what it is.
Yeah.
Your time,
at least you can get them for free,
but even then, I don't know. I just
you've still got to be able to use them. Yeah.
I don't know.
I must admit,
Just juice them or something.
I would freeze them.
Yeah.
Frozen grapes,
Yeah.
Take them out and you eat them. Yeah, pretty much frozen. They're beautiful. But that's a much better. There were some in that recipe book that I got that for free at an op shop. It was like in this trolley for free, which personally I thought was a great thing. But then there are some recipes that I'm not sure about. But it's very good, that book, in that it keeps a good list of what syrup is, what light syrup is, what heavy syrup is. So back to those questions of, do you need sugar and how much sugar do you need? It talks about using honey, talks about using nothing at all. So I think in that way, it's a very good resource.
We don't do all those fine things.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they
And they
do
love
even do
that.
olives.
In olive,
They
olives in
even
it.
do olives.
No, it'll be like 2 weeks, I think. Yeah,
But
no,
then
they're really bitter. And
But these ones just 2 to 3 months before you use them. So then there's no fermenting in this. It's just
Yeah. Your olives are already preserved in your brine. So you don't actually need to put them in, like, they're preserved. They'll stay there for years. Like, they will start to get soft after about 2 years. But You don't have to do anything to your olives. They just stay in whatever you've got. And if you boil them in this way, you will be killing off the good bacteria because they're fermented products like sauerkraut.
Yeah.
And you will be getting rid of that.
How do you debitter your olives?
There's a few. Well, they say that you should put the water on them. Sorry, hold on. Jiggle it around and make it work again. So when you do olives, you're supposed to put them in like a big bucket, right? Food grade plastic bucket or whatever you're going to do them in, or a crock or something. And you can put a salt brine on it, or you can just put water on them. And you would need to tip that out every day, they say. Every day, and you keep doing this, and then you do it less often, once a week, once a fortnight, or whatever. Because we produce 20-liter buckets, many of them. That's just not practical. But we've tried it. So we find that we just put them in a brine and walk away. And don't bother with it, and they are perfectly fine. And that's another thing that creates SCOBY.
Yeah.
We have very funny SCOBY sitting at the top of these olives, which you carefully just remove, and then start to use the olives underneath it. Great.
So how long do you leave them?
Months.
Yeah.
They're best. You don't really want to eat olives for a year. So you're actually eating the previous year's crop of olives. So right now, I'd be eating last year's crop of olives. And right now, this year's crop of olives will be sitting there in the brine. But I actually have 2 years ago that we're trying to finish, to be honest. So we're actually like a year behind, if you want to look at it like that. But they're still good. They're only just starting to get slightly softer. So they do need to be eaten. There's no point there. Now, they've just fit in here as far as the height of the jar. And I'm going to fill it with water, and I'm going to walk it around there. Which water is... This is the hot air. These are the hot jars. These don't need to be hot.
How much tomatoes was that you did? 2?
I bought 3.
Oh, 3 kilos.
And 3, 2, and these are 500s. So that's 1, 2, 3 liters. So
it's like about halfway or something.
It's a little bit more than half. It should be about 2/3 or something like that.
Yep.
2/3 full. And I'm going to put the lid on, and then I'll cross it them.
And bring it to the boil, just gentle boil,
Yeah. So when I hear them moving, I know that they're finished.
So what, you just bring them to the boil and that's it?
No, you bring them to the boil and allow them to continue to boil for 30 minutes, really.
Okay.
So we're going to keep that.
Yeah.
Got my lid on. My timer on. That's boiling now, which is good.
And they were hot tomatoes, but they can be cooler. I suppose
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They could be cold. I could have cooked them yesterday.
Right.
Put them in the jars today. Because that part doesn't matter. It matters for this pot on hot. But for this one, this is the processing. So I could have taken cold tomatoes. Doesn't matter. So I sometimes, when I've got lots of tomatoes, and I want to put them in, say, big jars, because sometimes you can get these very big jars. But cooking all of them at one time can be tricky, because tomatoes obviously don't all ripen at the same time. So I pull them off the vines, and I take them inside, and I don't always have them. So what I can do is put them in bags and freeze them. And then they explode anyway, and they open up in the bags and they just become liquid, and then you can just tip them straight in and put them straight into the containers. Or I can cook them and leave them in the fridge, and then the next day cook another batch so that I have double the quantity because I needed more, but I didn't have them off, ripe off the vines to be able to cook them all at once. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you're just going to go and purchase them, you can plan this out a whole lot better than if you're going to grow them, because you can't control what Mother Nature does. But if you go and purchase them, or you get a farmer and you say, I want this amount on this day, then you can be much more organized about the process. But if they're going to come out of your garden, you're going to have some challenges there. But you can do that. So you can freeze them, and they will just, because whenever you freeze something, that they will pop open, right? So you can just put big freezer bags, you just fill them. If you have space in your freezer, pop them in, and then your processing is pretty much done. Or you can cook them, and as long as you use them within a few days and process them all together in your batches, that's fine too. It doesn't matter. What matters is this process, everything's hot. Now, I'm just going to move this aside and get it out of the way. No, actually, I'm not. I'm going to put this in something. So I did one that was just a little bit extra. I think it'll be about this much. Yep. Now, cheese look like this, actually.
So could you also do just the zucchini raw and then add the hot line, or would you not?
Try that.
Yeah.
And they don't come out right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I can place exactly why. They seem raw. I don't know what else to tell you. They just work quite right.
Whereas with cucumber, you do them raw.
And the thinner you do them, probably the more you could get away with that. So I didn't choose the thinnest light on here. I could have chosen really thin. And then, yes, I could probably put them straight into very hot vinegar and they would cook like that. And that would be your cooking. So in that case, you would just bring your pickling liquid to the boil, take your very thinly sliced cucumbers, or whatever, but probably cucumbers will work best in that instance. Put them straight into that hot vinegar and turn it off. And then that would cook them. But because these were slightly thicker, didn't need to cook them. But I have done what you're saying, like right at the end of the season where I'm over it, and they just were not nice.
Yeah.
And I can't, because they didn't move properly. Do you know what I mean? Like, you want them to be wobbly, so they can be, a little bit rubbery, so they like sit on your sandwiches nice and whatever you're going to do with them, or on your cheese. I just like them with cheese. And it just didn't do that. Yes, I tried to cut corners, it didn't work. 4 jars are in there. Okay. So. Just going to have a little feel of them carefully and see how they're going. Yeah, there we go. So just again, I'm going to make sure, because they're hot, that I have gloves on and that I put them on something that's not hot. Because the hot stuff's going to go in. And make it hotter.
So how can you heat these jars but not the first ones?
Because everything has to be hot in this case. This is kind of a cheats method. This is like kind of the way most grandmas would have done things. Because it's fast. So if you've got hot chutney, it's hot already. If you have a hot jar and hot chutney, it seals it. That's the process of let me just think of how I can say this so it will make sense. In that method, it will not matter if you had cold things, you could still do it. So let's say you had not cooked but ripe pears that you had sliced, filled into your jars, and poured like a simple syrup over the top of them. That's not hot. Nothing's hot and it won't preserve. You have to put them in there. So that is forgiving. You can have cold things, warmer things, doesn't matter, that will work to preserve any of them. In this, everything has to be hot because it's like a cheats method, if you will. It's like a faster method. But it's very good for things that are already hot, like I have to think about it. Sorry. Things that are already hot, like chutneys, pickles, kasuri, or other kinds of like Indian pickle things. Does that make sense? Yes. Did I answer that sufficiently? Yes, correct. It's just two different methods.
So the end result is the same. You're just doing it in two ways.
Yeah.
Needs to get the seal some way or
Yeah.
another.
It's the seal. It's all about getting the seal. And in this way, because it's everything's hot, it's automatically going to suction that air down and it's the lid down and it's going to seal that lid.
Because it's the air that has the bugs in it.
It's the air that has the bugs.
Yeah.
So that isn't technically fermented, even though you made a brine.
This is not fermented. Fermented is a process where
You
there's no
sit on the
heat
bench. Yeah.
It's very yummy.
Yeah, you walk the bugs in the ferment.
So we could have done the tomatoes like that or the zucchini.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but the zucchinis always have to get hot. Yeah, but you're right. You can do it any which way. Yep.
That looks lovely.
And it's a pretty color because of the turmeric.
Yeah.
So I'm right-handed, so I'm sorry. I'm just going to flip this around. Hopefully you can all still see. But I'm struggling on my left side. So again, I don't want to go all the way up. But I think that looks good. What I'll do is, just so that doesn't, I'll put them up there and we'll look. Now I'll grab another one of these. I won't fill all 4 of these, there won't be enough, but I might get 3. I'm just going to refer back to this and see if I had anything else. So there's a beetroot recipe there, which I have to say is very, very good. You could do another thing that you could do. You didn't want to, if you have space in your fridge. So we talked originally about having space in your fridge and maybe needing to have things that were shelf stable, which these are, right? So that's important. But let's just say you do have space in your fridge. You could do quick picnic, much probably like the Japanese one. So you can have salt and or sugar and vegetables, and you can just put them straight in that pickling liquid, not cooking or anything, and put them straight into the fridge. And they'll pickle for the next day or so. And they're just quick pickles. I mean, they can even do it in the same day. You know, you can have them for dinner. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, I do that with onions all the time.
Yeah, the Mexican cuisine has a lot of that as well. So if you want to do like jalapenos, or sometimes they'll put jicama, or I don't know if they have jicama here, or carrots, or any kind of chilies. You can do a quick pickle on any of those in your fridge, and it can be ready for tonight, or like a Mexican dinner.
I did one last night, ready for tea.
There you go. So like, there's a lot of ways that we can preserve things.
We're having bao.
This was just about getting them on a shelf.
Which is
When you have a glut of something.
Yeah, when you have a glut or
and zucchinis.
Big fridge. You guys always laugh at my fridge. This is not wrong.
And
Full of all these things.
see, you have them in the cupboard.
that's it. It's the piece in there. But take pictures if you want of any of these that you like. I'll put this one back out. This one's quite dog-eared, so you can see what I like, what I make often. what my kids like. And yeah, I find something like that, like the fact that it's old fashioned, is probably the most reliable book you're going to find.
The best note service. Yeah.
I'm looking at obvious. Yeah, my kids love this. You can freeze it.
Yeah, so I'm going to fill 2. I'm going to have 1 half filled. If this happened to me at home, I would just use the half filled one, put it in my fridge, and just eat that one. I probably wouldn't do it straight away. Like I would wait a couple of days before I ate it, because I just find the longer they sit, the nicer they are. Are there any other questions about preserving? Not necessarily even about this, but just generally.
I was thinking, do you, with relishes, often I've recently read to turn the jars upside down.
Yeah.
Do you do that? I've done it. Whether it's necessary, it's sort of like you're grotting up the lid a bit, but it seals it well.
I've heard of such things, but I have never done them. Yeah, I don't know. Do you have any reason? No.
I've just recently read it a few times.
I have
sort of done it, but it's
also read it.
It's
Yeah, because it is subject to live.
That's right.
Yeah, and you wonder about the benefits of it, regardless, don't you? I mean, as long as you get that air out.
The seal, exactly.
As long as
seal
the
right.
seal is good, I wouldn't worry. And I would really hesitate. And I'll just, I know that not everybody has this, but these old lids, I inherited these golden colored lids from the 70s. That's what this book is from. They're horrible. Don't use them unless you absolutely have to. So I ran out mid processing, and I was like, well, I'll just use a couple of them, okay? Because I had run out of the silver lids, because these corrode, and they corrode badly on the inside, and then that's next to your food. And these I've never touched wood somewhere, I've never had these corrode on me, but this golden colored lids, and I wouldn't be encouraging my liquid near that lid because it will corrode faster. Does that make sense? And as a matter of fact, I will be inclined to use these as quickly as possible and get them away from that lid.
And also the jam, like I use jam jars, and you know how it's got the little rubber seal?
Yes.
On the inside of the lid.
Yes. This little rubber seal.
Yeah. I'm very careful about how many times you can reuse it.
Yeah, so
because that does corrode as well.
Actually. So the mason jars with the 2-step lids, with the screw-on lid and the flat piece, you can only use that flat piece once for that reason, because it has the little rubbery stuff. That's why you have to replace that every single time. Now with these, see if I can find one, but you can see it. These have a rubber ring in them. Okay, you see that purple? See the purple in there?
Yeah.
That's a little rubber ring that they tell you you're supposed to change every single time. Now, I have to be honest, I don't do that. What I do is that they're like a rubber band, but they're not as elastic as that. And I pull it, and if I see that it's got like little marks in it where it's starting to fray, I get rid of it and use a new one. But you can honestly get away with a few. You can with them a few times before that. If they get too hot, that's the cola. Yeah. But it's all about that thing, whether that rubbery thing is on that flat mason jar, whether it's this on these, or whether it's that rubbery thing there. That's what really matters. That actually is the thing that's creating more seal. Which is why if I had whacked this to open my previous jar and buckled that area, That's why it won't seal. If I had like a dent here, I could use it.
Yeah.
But you can't have a dent around where your sealing stuff is. That's why these are, can you,
Concave.
yeah, well, they're concave, but you can have like a little blemish here, and that's okay, because what matters is that rubber ring inside there. Yeah.
My ball jar things did corrode. And I thought, all this money for this dumb jar?
Yeah, but they're supposed to.
I didn't know.
Yes, and
Yeah.
you've got to, when you buy the bowl or whatever kind of mason jars, whatever brand, because Kilner is another mason jar that you can purchase here, which is much more common in Australia. Kilner brand, which is a type of mason jar. You've got to buy a whole other box of those flat lids, which is the equivalent in the Vacola Australian thing as the rubber seals.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you ever cook with the leftover vinegar in the jars, or do you utilize that?
Yes. So, we use that for salad dressing.
Yeah, nice.
That, and sometimes you know how you buy, or you can buy, cheese in oil. You know what I mean, like goat's cheese or whatever's packed in oil. So then I'll keep both those things, mix them together in that salad dressing. Because that oil, otherwise you just kind of get rid of it.
Yeah.
But it usually tastes really nice.
Yeah.
And so I'll mix that with this, and that's salad dressing, and then we just use it. Yeah.
So I was trying to think what you use it for, yeah.
Well, if you do say that, I've not tried it to put, you could probably use it again for pickling. I haven't tried that. But when you do a quick pickle in the fridge, like we were talking, you can just put thinly sliced stuff or beetroot, cooked beetroot straight into like a sorry, let me just turn this down. Sorry, wasn't paying attention to it, and I should have. So now that I can hear it's going, I need to turn it down so that they don't crack. If I was to have that sweet beetroot pickling liquid left, I would just cook some more beetroot, slice it up, put it straight back in. And you could probably get away with doing that a couple of times. Yeah, so I would try to use them. I wouldn't get rid of it. Find some way to keep using them. Yeah. So you can see that these didn't make as much. And so that was 1 kilo of zucchini and a larger. And there was still more than enough liquid despite the fact that I was a quarter cup full.
Yeah.
And they do smell nice. Yeah. So, I think that was all I wanted to say. This has another 11 minutes. If they were bigger jars, like thicker jars, or the stuff inside was like more viscous, like thicker, say like the apples in that jar there, I might let them go a little bit longer. I might let them go, say, 45 minutes. Like if you think of the difference between something like this and mashed potatoes, right? Mashed potatoes being very thick. You wouldn't want to do this with mashed potatoes. And something much thinner than like this, the processing time would be less for this than it would be for something quite thick. Because to get the same temperature, the very inside of that jar, it takes longer to get to that temperature inside this jar as opposed to in the middle of that jar. Does that make sense? Like if I was to stick a thermometer at the very center, it would take longer for the very center of this to become 100 degrees than it would take the very center of this to become 100 degrees.
So what's your total boiling time on the tomatoes?
So I'm going to do 30 minutes on them because they're about this size and they were hot to begin with.
Yeah.
If I was doing this, I'd probably let it go. Like if that's what was in there right now, I would let this go more like 45 minutes.
Okay.
Just because it's thicker, and I would be concerned that I want to get the very center of that to 100 degrees. Yeah. But if I was doing this, it would get to 100 degrees much faster. So I could maybe do this for 25 minutes. But on average, if you look through, when you look through here, they will tell you the average is about 30 to 45 minutes. If you had a really big jar, which I know I should have brought some, you might let it go an hour.
Can you go too long?
surely I think you could forget about it, but you're not gonna over sterilize it. Like you're not gonna over get rid of the bacteria.
No, I
can't
think the
over-
only thing would be you would start to cook
Yeah, you
more
would-
what's in there, but that might not be a problem.
Yeah, that
either.
might not be a problem,
No.
but it might make them soft. Like say it was
Softer, yeah.
pears
Right.
and you forgot about them, they would be
Yeah.
soft and they would be not pleasant.
Pureed.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna be kind of like baby food. You wouldn't have intended that. But you couldn't overheat them as far as like you killing the bacteria. That's the important bit.
It's the underheating that's the issue.
The
isn't
underheating.
it?
That's the
Yeah.
issue. Yeah.
Okay.
And you check too that, like, when you take them out of the heat, that you get a compost.
Yeah, so I take them out of the heat, just in case we don't hang around for that time period. Take them out of the heat. I put them on something like this because again, they're actually going to be even hotter than what I just touched, right? And I will let them sit. And of course, as I'm doing my business, you can hear them start to pop. I was hoping that we might hear these ones pop, and we might. So you'll hear them get suctioned down, like when you make jam or whatever, you always hear that.
Yeah.
Well, you want to hear that. Yeah, that's right. But later on in the day, you can go past and just make sure. Yeah. And if you have any suspicions, you don't have to put it on your shelf or just use it or put it in your fridge. I mean, sometimes I find that these fail, and what I'll notice, what will tip me off is I will see a discoloration at the top. I mean, there's always a discoloration. If you can see these, it's very minimal, but the top of that and that color is different. I mean, mind you, it probably has some cinnamon and stuff, so there's going to be some variation in color anyway. But if you look at the top of that, it's a little bit more gray and less pink than here. And that's just the oxidation from being next to the air there. So what you can do if that bothers you can just take that all off. But what I notice when they have failed, when my seal isn't good, and I didn't notice it at the beginning, and I put it on my shelf, is a discoloration that gets quite dark up top. And usually then when you open it, it's usually easy to open, which is always a worry. You'll see it has like penicillin growing on it.
Can you throw it away?
I do. Oh, I'll feed it to my chicken. They eat anything. So, yeah, they're always my answer to everything. Just put it in there. If they don't eat it, well, the mice probably will. So, some people eat it. You can put it in your compost. But certainly don't scrape it off and then eat it. But if it's discolored and it's just an aesthetic thing, then yeah, scrape off the top and eat it. But not as something to throw.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So, if you want to hang out for the next 5 minutes, we'll do that. So I'll just say next time we're going to do how to stretch your budget. And I might just kind of tell you what we might talk about, or what I might talk about. I'll just get to my notes. What I'll do is I'll bring a chicken, like a previously roast chook, and then I'll kind of use that as the illustration to talk about how I might use that to stretch my meals out. We'll talk about different ideas on how to do those things, but I'll try to be as clear and as practical as possible, and things that I do at home. So like, how would I take that one chook, or like maybe I do 2 chooks at a time, and how would I make that into like my meals for the week? Or how would I stretch that out to go as far as I possibly could with that one thing? And so I'll talk about what I might do with the leftover meat, what I would do with the leftover bones, how I could try to stretch that chicken out to be, 4 or 5, maybe 6 meals, what I could do to do that. So that's what I'll talk about next time. And I'll bring props and stuff, and we can kind of have a chat about how we might do that.
Next Thursday.
Yeah. So that'll be the next one, and then we'll do beans and legumes after that. I think I have them in the right order. If I don't, I'm sorry.
That's
I'm going to do a homemade yogurt.
The yogurt should be interesting because I saw the recipes for that.
I'm coming down with it.
Yeah, so homemade yogurt, we'll leave that to the next one.
I haven't put my name down for the beans one. What dates are on?
So they're
So
all
the next
Thursday.
They're all
Thursday,
Thursday.
the next 6 Thursdays, or
Right,
5
okay.
after this one.
I don't think I'm registered for next week, but for the beans and leggings, I am. Okay.
Yeah.
I'd love to come next week too.
Yeah,
But I'm
absolutely.
just gonna have to
But you've got
leave.
free, plenty of room, so.
I might
Beans
put
and
my name
leggings.
down for the beans and legumes. Or
Yeah.
I don't know. What will I do
One like
next week?
because not everybody knows how to cook them, and they're very inexpensive protein. And I find that, I think this goes back again to the 70s. Like when I was a kid, there was a philosophy that you could add a little bit of meat as not just a flavor, but as nutrients to a pot of beans, and serve that with a whole grain on the side, and it was a complete protein and fully accepted. And I think just because of trends and popular culture like keto, etc., where meat is the focus,
Yeah.
we've kind of gotten away from that.
Yeah.
And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with a good steak or whatever, but it's outrageously expensive to want to feed family. Like if it's just not possible, that's just silly.
Yeah.
It's not possible anymore. But there are ways to take the yummy flavor and impart it in the beans and serve everybody for very cheap. And I think it's something we've just learned. We haven't learned it in this generation, right? Something my parents did, but not something we tend to do. So that's what I'll talk about with that one. The homemade yogurt I'll show you. It's a lot of waiting. I'll be honest. We have to wait for it to come to temperature. We have to wait for it to come back down to temperature. But we will do other things in the meantime. I'll show you how to do Greek yogurt and what that actually means. How to do like yogurt cheese, which I think you have a different name for. That's what we would call it in the States. Like a lovna. Do you know you get like a Lebanese lovna, little round circular balls of cheese in oil here? I don't know if you've ever
Ladna.
We've got bocconcini down here. Or ricotta, not ricotta,
not ricotta, but I can show you guys how to do ricotta while I'm doing the yogurt because it's extremely similar.
Simple.
Yeah, extremely similar. You would just get to a certain point and then add vinegar in one, that will give you ricotta. Not in the other one, that'll give you yogurt.
What was the second word? Not?
But like if you didn't put you put vinegar in.
Like what is
one,
not?
and then you make that previous yogurt. You'll get yogurt in that batch, and then you would get cheese in the other batch. So we can talk about that too.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And paneer. Like,
Sorry?
Paneer.
And so that you could press it down.
Yeah.
And so when you had your ricotta, you could press that down, and you would get. I'm trying to think of what it is. There's other names for it.
Yes, there are.
So there's paneer if it's Indian.
Indian.
But if queso fresca, if you're in Mexico, and it's pressed ricotta, I believe, it's Italian, but I don't know how to say that word. But it's all the same thing. And if you take your ricotta and you just put a weight on it, and all the water comes out, and then it's like a cake, kind of like tofu, if you will, but made out of not soybeans but cheese. We can talk about all those.
Cool.
Fascinating.
And then we're going to do a baby food and a lunchbox one. So, yeah, that's next.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'll leave these in case anybody needs an extra, or if you want to pass them, we didn't get to come.
Thank you.
Now this has 12 seconds, so I'm going to cancel it. I'm not actually going to take that little just yet, because I don't want them to crack. Like I want the temperature to just come down naturally.
Yep.
So I'm going to have to wait. I didn't think about that a minute ago. Thought I could just take them out. I really shouldn't, because that might shock them, especially because it's cold. So I let them come down. I'll just kind of tidy up, I think. And then in time, I'll take them out. So if you want to hang around, great. If not, that's fine too.
We need to try and get some more.
That one. I'm just thinking I have to get my phone babysit every time I come. Like, I should please.
Sit outside. Why not? I just leave outside.
Want to keep the recording going?
She
To finish up. Yeah, how long's it gonna be? A couple of minutes. Yeah. All right. I'll do 2 different videos here.